Okay, Bismillah. Thank you
Bismillah.
all for coming in and joining us here live and or on the replay for the Unread Book Club. This is February edition where we're going to be discussing Ibn Arabi's book or little treatise or letter, I guess, formally, the Journey to the Lord of Power,
Yeah,
which is when I remember reading it the first time, it just grabbed me into a whole, you know, rabbit hole, if you will, and deeper and deeper into the topics that were shared in there. But I think before we dive deeper into the book, maybe if we can just take a few minutes to be here and so that we're all into this space from the same on the same ground and in the same presence. So if you're here with us, if you can close your eyes maybe or have a soft gaze and just maybe taking a few breaths to settle in. And as you breathe and become aware of your breath, you're bringing the wholeness of yourself here. And if you touch that space within yourself that is here and present, then this is the same space that we're all touching within ourselves. And here collectively, so that God willing, this conversation is happening from that space. And whenever you feel ready, you can slowly bring yourself here into the space, this virtual space that we're going to be sharing with each other. Alhamdulillah, thank you. Thank you for being here. Um, Journey to the Lord of Power. Ibn Arabi, this is a letter that he wrote to somebody who asked him about retreat, about how to perform a retreat. And Ibn Arabi's response was the book that we now have, and we're going to read parts of on how to perform that retreat within oneself. And really, earlier today, Antoine and I were talking, and there's some realization that really the book itself is a study of transcendence from the mystics' point of view, from the internal perception point of view. And it's much more, and it's covered in different language and all that kind of stuff. But I think at the heart of it, the the teaching that's in it, some feel like teaching that's general, and some feel more like instructions actually too. Um, it goes in so many in so many different ways. But I think at the root of it is him describing this transcendence and the qualities of transcendence using the language of the Sufis and the language that him and the student might understand and him and his peers might understand and the people in that time. One of the thing that struck me the first time that I read the book was the sharpness of his words, the matter-of-factness in the way that he presents ideas. I felt the sense of certainty and certitude of his expression that allowed me as the reader to somehow trust the ground that he's presenting and I'm following him through. So he's so sure of how he's presenting the idea that I'm like, okay, I'll trust what you're saying. Later, I can see the danger in that, right? Because it's a double-edged sword of somebody's sureness and certitude as they're asserting their certainty into what the reader is believing. But somehow the first time I read it, I felt some level of assurance. I felt directly um, spoken to. I felt as if the letter was directed to me. And the language that he uses made me feel that I was worthy of the knowledge that he's sharing because the use of language such as, "Know, O noble brother." I'm like, okay, yes, I can identify. I was able to plug myself in into these um, uh, titles. So there's a level of assumption that, or he's putting the reader as somebody who asked a genuine question, and that the reader is not dumb, right? He doesn't have to dumb it down. The reader is can follow along pretty much. So there's some kind of a respect, and I felt that respect in the language. Um, so that in itself, and obviously um, the opening, I think Ibn Arabi does such a good job of opening all of his friends, all of his text and books pretty much in praise of God. So there's always this devotional aspect that is right right at it. You don't have to go further than the first paragraph. Um, so I think what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna just read a highlighted paragraph that I feel like maybe we can spend the whole talk on, but obviously I want to open it for more than just that. But I'm gonna share my screen and um, read that section. So this is Journey to the Lord of Power, and I think there's multiple versions outside. I mean, different than this. Um, this was, I think it had the either the translation or the forward um, by Sheikh Muzaffar of the Jarrahi order right here in upstate New York. I think he wrote the introduction to this. I'm not sure if he's the one who translated it, but I doubt. Um, so the section that I want to read is this that's highlighted. He says, and this is on the book itself, this is page 26. And he says, know, O noble brother, that while the paths are many, the way of truth is single. The seekers of the way of truth are individuals. So, although the way of truth is one, the aspects it presents vary with the varying conditions of its seekers, with the balance or imbalance of the seeker's constitution, the persistence or absence of his motivation, the strength or weakness of his spiritual nature, the straightness or deviation of his aspiration, the health or illness of his own relation to his goal. Some seekers possess all the favorable characteristics, while others possess only some. Thus, we see that the seeker's constitution, for instance, may be a hindrance, while his spiritual striving may be noble and good. And this principle applies in all cases. Now, the first sentence of this, know that while the paths are many, the way of truth is single. And then he kind of tells you what the paths are many means, what he meant by that. That it's pretty much the seekers are individuals. So the paths, the way that it's going to look is going to depend on the individual seekers as they're walking their way of truth. But the first time that I read it, which I think, I don't know, a few years ago, this really struck me. And I'm actually very thankful that and grateful that I read this part, especially this early on when I was introduced to Sufism, because the idea of the paths are many, but the way of truth is single became so um, centered in my way of experiencing myself, in how I relate to other people, in how I relate to different ideas, the idea of perception. And there's something about that, but maybe that's for maybe a different topic as far as like um, in which order are people introduced to a particular topic, I think can color an entire experience. Um, but yeah, I wanted to open for this particular paragraph right here. What are the things that come up when we read or when you hear um, the way of truth, while the paths are many, the way of truth is single. Like, wh- what is that? What does that do um, to you as you hear that? As you walk your own path, as you walk, I'm assuming, I don't know if we all see ourselves walking the way of truth or not, but um, yeah, I want to open it up to see what either general, what you might think of the text itself, if you read it, because I know we're just reading these texts, but if not, like what this specifically, um, what does it speak to? Yes, Antoine.
Yeah, man. Thank you for reading it and thank you for choosing this book. I found this book, Ibn Arabi's part, incredibly revelatory and sweet. Um, I love this opening line, at least in this paragraph, right? About the path, the that while the paths are many, the way of truth is single. I think about that in terms of like all the different religions and traditions and things that's out there, and how based on a person's culture and what they've read, their conditioning, their trauma, all these things play a role in if and how they might see the divine or God, and how God or the divine is colored for them. And I think about that when he says the paths are many, because I think I mean, I don't know what other word, I was going to say superficial level, but I'm going to say at the gross level of perception, when we think about the divine and we think about life or reality in general, there's so many different ways to see it. Even if you're in the same tradition or the same religion or the same understanding about science or the nervous system and things like that, even then, there's still so many, probably an infinite number of ways of seeing something or being on what your perception, your conditioning tells you the path is. But he's saying right here that ultimately, no matter what we look at it, no matter how we speak about it, no matter the cosmology, it's all coming back to, in my opinion, what he's saying, like one singular truth. And for him and for reality as he sees it, God is God. And so if God is God, then it doesn't matter what garment God wears from your lens or your perspective, whether you know, you're in the religion of science and talk about photons and neutrons and physics, or whether you're, Mohammedan. I don't even know where that phrase came from, but I heard that phrase before, or Christian or Judaism or any of those things, shamanic or whatever it might be, the surface level or gross level of those things might look different based on the nervous system and the lineage, the time, the season that we're in. But ultimately, it's all pointing back at this ineffable uh, reality or truth that is singular or is all in all. And so, the best way to describe this path that is one is, I think I heard one culture or one religion calls it the path that is no path, because all roads lead there, regardless of what we're saying is happening on the surface in terms of cosmology. The primordial truth is that there's all oneness at the most subtle level. Anyway, that's how I see those first lines.
That's beautiful.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah. And I definitely can see that in the um yeah, general sense as far as like what you said, the different traditions, the different um mystical traditions or religions or the ways that people are approaching this singular summit, right? Or the singular truth that everybody is seeking. One thing that I would add maybe or ask is maybe I think it's more of a question. I think here one of the things that's also highlighted is that it's not just the truth is singular, but also there's a way the right. He's not just saying the paths are many and the truth is one, right? Because that's a different thing. That's saying that's kind of like the perennial idea. The perennial philosophy idea is saying there's one summit and there's many paths that would lead you to that one summit. What this is saying, I think, I don't know, maybe some of you can elaborate on that, is it's not necessarily just saying that the truth is one, but the way of truth is one. So there's some subtle difference here. That's not only the truth is singular, but the way of truth is single. While the paths within that way eh, are many, which makes me think about, is there some kind of, kind of we spoke a little bit about this earlier, Antoine, this idea of transcendence. Like, are all of these paths have some way, somehow, an aspect of transcendence or an aspect for nervous system regulation or an aspect of refining perception, right? But the way they do it is all different. But is that what he's alluding to over here when he says the way of truth is one? Meaning, in whatever way you go about it, there's some level of perception refinement that needs to take place. I'm just adding that you know from what I'm thinking. Or nervous system regulation is maybe he won't call it that, right? But now we might call it that. Um, yeah, the fact that there's it's not only the truth is single, but the way of truth is single. There's something about that that stands out to me. And it's more of a question also,
Mm.
because it allows it to reflect, you know, my path, does it, do all paths participate in this way of truth? Or are some paths outside of that? Because here I'm not talking about the single truth, but I'm talking about that way. You know what I mean?
Like the road to it, right?
Right.
It's a great thought to bring
Hmm.
up. I mean, when I think of it, I might be a bit biased because of my own experience and my own background of what I study and stuff like that. But you always think about from all these different traditions, it seems as if the prophets or the mystics of those traditions, the aesthetics, when you get right down to it, they're all like pointing to this same thing. They're speaking in this one voice that all seems to have to do with refined perception. And
Hmm.
that refined perception is something that they consider to be um, allowing the awareness to know itself beyond any conditioning that's been placed on it, any traumas, any things like that. And so they do some version of transcendence, it seems to me, right? That allows the tightness wrapped around the mind and the narrative to release so that anything we can think of as God or as the ultimate version of our cosmology would somehow have to be transcendent, oh, beyond what thought can produce, beyond what a concept can produce. And the only way in my head to get there, if you are embodied, is to transcend beyond the thought level of perception. Because oftentimes when people are thinking, the thoughts are on this superficial or surface level. But when we get to awareness, being aware of itself beyond thought, knowing itself beyond thought is transcendent the activity of thought, where thoughts can grab hold of something. And it seems like these different leaders of traditions are always pointing to what's beyond thought, a realm of existence that's beyond what we conceptualize or what we can um, sort of articulate. Is always pointing to this ineffable that has to be lived through awareness rather than um, conceptuality. And if that's the case,
Hmm.
in that way, singular way, always seems like it's somehow moving beyond the grasp of thought or narrative about any particular tradition we're holding tightly in our ego or in our you know,
Yeah.
cosmology. That's my thoughts about it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That there is somewhat, I mean, even the way of truth, even to move towards truth, that is a big concept, right? And that the movement is somehow more than the mere physicality of whatever the first thing that we see or the first thing that we think of, right? That the refinement is happening in a way, kind of like right here, where he says manifestation, yeah, that veil, right? Like going beyond that veil, it's constantly moving in a direction that's not just, okay, this is realities. Whatever I see is the truth and it's reality. There's something that is greater, and there's a pull and there's a movement towards that, um, the beyond, if you will, right? And the ways of which these might be the different paths, right? That kind of the different ways that people move um, uh, in that direction. which is interesting enough. This is, and I also want to open it up to, because I know you read it as well, Antoine, and I know you have some highlighted areas here. Um, but it does kind of what we're talking about with perception and moving beyond, and part of that transcendence, according to him, he's saying that this revelation corresponds to the extent and form of knowledge. This reminds me of something that you spoke about, Antoine, with MUM. The knowledge of him, meaning the beloved, meaning the one, from him that you acquire at the time of your struggle and training, you will realize in contemplation later. But what you contemplate of him will be the form of knowledge which you established previously. You advance nothing except your transference from knowledge, ilm, to vision, ayn, and the form is one. So here also speaking about the culture and the knowledge that's already built in that culture, or in one's own experience, right? Internally, and maybe some definitely externally, but more importantly, even internally, that this knowledge that one has through whatever he calls it, struggle or training or all the different kind of studying. But what you contemplate of him will be the form of knowledge which has already been established. So what you already know, whatever vision you have, whatever transcendence you have, whatever ideas that might come up that of this, even the idea of transcendence itself that you might have is going to be conditioned to the previous knowledge, whether it's culture, reading stuff, immersing oneself in certain practices, all of that. So that even in the aspect or in the transcendence itself, and to come out of it, the way that you would describe that would be with the prior. That's what I mean. The form is one. It's going to be with the same form. It's just, it's a different, uh, it's a different experience because there's that transference from the knowledge. Now you taste it, but in order to say what you tasted, you're only using words that you know. So then you're going to say it tastes as sweet as honey. If you've never tasted honey, you're not going to say as sweet as honey. You're going to say it's as whatever, sweet as an apple, whatever that means, right? So you're only going to describe it based off of the knowledge of which you have, which, I think it caused society a lot of trouble because we often are lost in the knowledge aspect. We're lost between this vision and knowledge, you know, uh, pendulum, if you will, right? Because we either see somebody and we say, well, how you describing it doesn't fit the knowledge that I have, or it doesn't even fit my experience. But we don't know that our experience is actually based off of the other stuff and all um, that comes with it. Hmm.
Yeah, bro, absolutely agreed. I feel like, this is where all the not all the, but so many arguments and wars and stuff happens here in this exact spot where, I say tomato, you say tomato, and are we talking about the same actual fruit, or is it a vegetable, or is this kind of like, regardless of what we call it, is it the same thing, And us not being able to figure that out, you know, we just want to go to war over tomato, tomato. I'm over, man. I may be oversimplifying it, right? But like, so much is leading back to these semantics that we can't really agree on because the language drifts once you come out of transcendence. It's doing its best to really express what this what awareness was aware of when it was beyond language. And when you come
Mhm.
back in language, like you said, it's kind of like I only have English. I only have the words that I knew before I had this experience, if I could even call it an experience, right? Because that quote you said earlier about I really don't know exactly how it went, but about it appears as a veil to us because the light
Mhm.
shines so brightly, but technically is not a veil. It's just
Mhm.
that like when we're in it, there there's no way to fully express it. It's like we can only ever point to it or live it, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
Um, and if I know he said somewhere in here he spoke about like he said that how did he describe this? I don't know where it's at, right? I don't even know if I copied it down, but he said that absorption, oh no, he said that the return is greater than the absorption.
Mhm.
And he's speaking about the absorption into the divine or diving into the transcendent. And when he says that, what I see based on, I guess, context clues is that, like, he's saying that once you come out of transcendent, it has to be lived, you know? And if it's not established, it's just because you dived into the divine and you experienced the divine, you come back out, and after a little while, those old habits, old ways of being, it starts to reemerge because this experience of this presence drifts, or our experience of it. Maybe the presence is never drifting. It's just how much we can be aware of it is probably what's drifting back to the default. And
Mhm.
I imagine, based on what he's saying in this book, is many times as we go to that place, as we saturate in an experience, especially in a practice like this, which is if you could say a little bit more about what this whole practice of retreat was. Oh, I
Mhm.
appreciate it because I'm relating it to the act of transcendence during meditation, but this is a very specific practice from what you were sharing with me. So over time, this person is going through this practice. You know what I'm talking about when you shared.
Right. Yeah.
And so if you
Yeah. Yeah. So this retreat, a Sufi, as they call it, Sufi Khalwa retreat, is traditionally a retreat that is 40 days or 40 nights. Um, Retreat where somebody would isolate themselves and go into a room, literally just dark, just pitch black room for 40 days, and they're eating, they're drinking water, sometimes milk, and eating pretty much nuts and dried fruit.
Mm,
And the entirety of the time that they spend, which is, he kind of uh, maybe he gave some kind of intentions about, maybe we'll talk about it later, but they're going in and they're just meditating pretty much. They're performing dhikr. They're performing this ritual of remembrance, this practice of remembrance over and over for 40 days, not speaking to anybody in pitch black room,
mm,
which is intense, you know? Um, even before that, it's kind of intense because they do some kind of sacrifice, you know, uh, to feed the poor. So they would do that. They would maybe get a sheep or something like that, and they would feed everybody in the neighborhood and stuff like that. But it's an intense practice, right? So this retreat or this treatise, this letter, is to guide somebody who's going into that practice itself, which he kind of says somewhere in the book, in this letter, that, hey, if you're doing it, make sure you're doing it good for a good reason, let's say, or something like that, and make sure you clarify your intention, and that when you're isolating yourself, that people are not reaching you because that's gonna come into your space and you just let people know. And that one thing that I also like is that you're going into retreat not because people are not because people are giving you so much trouble that you want to go into retreat, but it's actually because you not knowing how to handle your own trouble and you're bringing trouble into other people's life that you should go into retreat. So the shifting the attention of saying, "Hey, I'm gonna go retreat." Everybody's crazy. Everybody is too much. I'm gonna retreat now and I'm gonna work on myself. He's saying, "No, no, no. You're going into retreat because you can't handle it. It's a fall. The short is on you. Don't blame nobody else out there." Um, So that's kind of like the premise of this entire letter that he's writing, right? But the beautiful thing is, to your point, Antoine, is that even that process is a process of transcendence in some type of way, um, which is which is beautiful. And Aram says, "Yeah, I need to go to do a retreat." Yup. I mean, yeah, they have these retreats are also very, I mean, I don't know to this intensity kind of 40 days in darkness and all that kind of stuff, but they're out there. And even what do they call that? Like the Buddhist, or I don't know if this is a Buddhist thing where they do like 10-day fast, silence,
Vipassana.
Vipassana. People swear by it, right? Just even silence and meditation for 10 days straight does something to the nervous system and to perception itself that is, people swear by. And, you know, Jesus did it in his 40-day in the wilderness. And the stuff that Ibn Arabi shares here is very parallel to Jesus' teaching and his experience. Um, that's a good time. The last 10 days of Ramadan, that's a good time to do. And typically they're the most charged, right? The last third of the month where the body's already kind of, you're tired and the fasting days are getting longer and the last 10 days just charged with, um, as he calls it here in the book, himma, the spiritual aspiration is just is just there.
I got a question, but before I ask my question, I wanted to make sure that Paul and everyone else had an opportunity. Is it okay? Oh, Paul, you got something?
Well, yeah, I was actually I'm focusing in on our term, what how do you know is that the way it's said? WAQT,
Waqt,
what
yes, the moment.
what? Yes, well, okay. So uh, it clusters around a number of ways. It means to specify. It means to delimit. It could mean to appoint. It could mean to assign a moment, an instant, and it can also mark a boundary. It usually simply means a time or a moment. That's but with uh, Sheikh Al Akbar, what is the one who specifies? What is the one who is specified? What is the nature of the boundary itself? So uh, what is a cut of the real. It's where it's not a segment of chronological time, but it's the incision where the real discloses itself without a remainder uh, as uh, Ibn Arabi says, the child of the moment, Ibn al-Waqt, is the one who has no yesterday and no tomorrow. Now, that's not quietism in the sense of not having thoughts, but what is a point where the real removes all alternatives. In that way, it's like a revelation. What is a boundary that can't be crossed? It's you have to think of this now as instant. The real is disclosing itself to you in this instant, and this instant is absolutely now. But it's not the now that we attempt to clinch onto. There's we're actually the what is when in which there is not that. It's the assignment of the real in the present disclosure. In other words, it's that affirmation that comes not from oneself, but from the real itself presenting itself. So it's where it's that numinous quality of simple awareness that is neither moving, neither conjuring up memories from the past or anticipating uh, issues of tomorrow, but you're in that betweenness, that uh, uh, Barzakh.
Mm-hmm.
And the what is the real's decision. It's the real's decision. It's not the servant's. So this is not something you can't, make this. You can't make it happen, but it happens. It happens. So it's a way of being present that is not grasping the moment, but is watching the moment go by as a trace. And you stay in that betweenness, which is no, there is no God but God, there is no God but God. Uh, you're in that betweenness, that in which both are true, and you're not grabbing either. You're in that purely paradoxical state.
Yeah,
And
that's great. That is perfect because there is that pause which is right in there, right? So it's right in between. There's no God, La ilaha
Mhm.
illallah, except God,
Yeah,
right?
and
And that
and
pause in the middle, that kind of consolidate.
that's where the WAP says that's
Um,
the disclosure. Both are true, neither are true.
right.
Both are true, neither are true. And you could just roll out endlessly, endlessly, endlessly. Yes, contraries. The moment delimits what is possible for you right now. The real appoints your station with his breath. And in terms of uh, knowing, recognizing this disclosure, it's very much classically both a constraint and a liberation. The constraint of the WAP is it's a limit. It happens in an instant that you can't catch. You can flow with it. That's the breathing, but you can't catch it. If you try to catch it, you miss the point. It's the only place where the real is encountered. It's the only place where the real is encountered. You're freed from the burden of alternatives, plans, anxieties, and self-authorship. You are liberated from your nafs.
Mhm.
And of course, you know, things. That's the paradox then of the constraint that it's limited and that it's also the only place where the real is encountered. It's the moment binds us so that we may be free. The moment binds us that we may be free. And yet the strangeness is if we attempt to grasp that moment, we are actually binding ourselves and not being free.
Hmm.
So there's that very subtle betweenness, as you expressed with there is no God but God. That that
Yes.
being between these things. That so in that way, what is the Barzakh of temporal existence?
Hmm.
It's the isthmus where the servant witnesses the real's decree. So the other thing is that if the what is that it is if we recognize it, if we can recognize it, uh, we we can uh, uh, beef up. so what was that's not we we can be present as present lets us be present or
Right.
allows where there is no we're sort of witnessing. We're on the sideline. We're not an agency anymore with WAP. The agency is um, and there's a yeah there's a comportment to this manners uh, of if we experience this, the first thing we have to do is we have to notice it, don't flee it. But another thing, we also have to not anticipate it, saying, "Oh, it's going to come again," because these things it happens and they're so fleeting that it'll be over before we noticed it, and we'll say, "I wanted that," and then of course we're lost. You can't regret the what came before, and we can't imagine what may be better or what could be better, and
Yeah,
we can't claim to be the agent of the moment. The moment
that's
is our agency to meet the moment with the form that it demands. And as Ibn
yeah.
Arabi says, the Gnostic is the form of their moment.
The Gnostic is the
That
form.
that's the beginning of the porous the porous heart that
Wow.
that that, that carries with it Jalal and Jamal.
Oh man,
Uh, you know,
that was beautiful.
Yeah, Paul. That was really beautiful, man. Thank you for sharing that, brother.
I mean, that's really the heart of it also, right? Because the yeah, even on experiential level, like to constantly submit oneself into that humility that it's by the grace of the beloved that these moments come, and by the hopefully the only thing that, if any, is this refinement to be able to receive such moments or to notice such moments outside of just the intellectualization of these moments. But because you brought that moment into the idea of waqt, I want to kind of add to what you said from, unless you have something to share, Antoine.
Um, well, just a quick story about
Mhm.
that, what he was describing that may relate to what you're about to share next, because you're going to share this paragraph, I imagine. I always tell you about how when I did that first water fast, that first prolonged water fast, and I was in such a rough place in my life, right? Really, really bad. And I was like God, if you're a real thing, I'm gonna have to just do what I heard all these different sages do. And I just started fasting. I was trying to go for a 40-day water fast. And as I got deeper and deeper into fast, I was just in prayer and reading everything that was sort of devotional and just praying and listening to devotional music. And I was in such a state of like a altered state during this water fast, my first prolonged water fast. I felt completely raptured up with God, with the divine. And I was moving through the world during the weeks of that water fast in that space. And it was just coiling deeper and deeper into that space. After the experience of the water fast, I just read everything I can get my hands on about the scientific understanding of water fasting, trying to figure out what happened to me, and reading all these different books about water fasting from the perspective of different spiritual traditions and stuff like that. But no other water fast other than that first one had that sort of divine quality to it. It was almost as if I couldn't press the button that said water fast and just make the divine show up like that. It was a self-disclosure from the other side, as Paul was describing. It was like I couldn't put the algorithm or the ingredients together to make it happen like that. I could do that, but it seemed like showing up was at its pleasure and not my intellectual uh, putting together of a recipe to have it happen in the way that it happened originally. So I just wanted to
Mm.
share that anecdote about what happened to me. Bro.
Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, the grace that, to allow for things to happen and to be open for things to happen. This is kind of, I mean, we spoke about this in multiple talks where the idea between the effort and grace and the effortlessness, and to leave space for grace, because it really is a point of like, hey, I can't control this. There's something that I can control, even as sweet as these moments may be. And we would want it to be, but the minute we want to grab it, it's no longer, you know? Even if it lasts for what, few seconds at most, these moments, sometimes these moments of presence, but they're just so enriching that it can fill you up for, for a long time. But Ibn Arabi says, when he's talking about the moment, um, so in this page, I think I'll read this page and maybe the one after that. Uh, he says, every seeker inevitably will experience the impact of the states. This is kind of maybe what you're talking about, Antoine, um, and maybe a little bit Paul, and the blending of the worlds with one another. These are the different realms and different states of which we're experiencing, whether it's during transcendence or just regular states that sometimes come. But the development from this stage to the stage of divine wisdom appearing within the customary outward principles is incumbent upon him. Transcendence of the customary order will become his secret, so that events beyond the ordinary will accompany him ordinarily. Right? This is kind of like the experience that you spoke about, Antoine. Right? Within this, transcendence is happening, and it's when the way that I understand this, become his secret, meaning it is so individually you that there's no words that you can possibly say that will be able to share that secret. Another way that some people would say the secret protects itself, meaning because there's no other it can never be expressed, it can never be revealed, so that these experiences, the ordinary things the beyond the ordinary will become ordinary. And that is so subjective, so inside, that it's a secret. He will say unceasingly with every breath, my Lord, increase me in knowledge while the heavenly sphere turns by your breath. So this is the breath of the merciful that Paul was talking about, hopefully that these moments come with the breath of the beloved. And let him strive that his moment be his breath. So imagine just even the imagery from the imagery that comes with this, right? That the one breath, which is this movement, and it's so delicate. It's like spirit. That's why spirit is breath, right? That one's presence, one's waqt, one's moment is divine spirit. When the influence of the moment befalls him, he will receive it. Let him beware of becoming enamored of the influence of the moment, but let him remember it, for it will be necessary to him if he instructs. Most of the sheikhs are eliminated as teachers only by neglecting to remember what we have mentioned and abstaining from it totally. So, to be lost
Uh,
in that moment, yeah.
yeah, I wanted to uh, move. You had a question which was at what precise moment does consciousness depart from what is present? And uh, I wanted to uh, reflect before I start with that. I wanted to talk a little bit about the secret of
Mm,
what the Bill's appointment with us. In other words, that's grace. That's the well, that's grace being present. You get some of this when you've done Zik for, for a while. Your breath in the movement with other breaths as you suddenly find yourself in sort of a cosmic clock or dance that's moving with the spheres, which is very much where the breath of the planets turning uh, the cosmos breathes, and we breathe with that. We all breathe in our own rhythm, but that rhythm is this self disclosure. The reels appointing itself in this way. So one of the things it does is it brings us to the level of our capacity, and as we become uh, more attuned to that subtle those subtle invitations, our capacity becomes we would think we have a greater capacity, but we also have a lesser capacity, incapacity of the incapacity. We actually become uh, more paying attention. There's and that's bringing us into the possibility of witnessing, and the
hmm
witnessing here is the real's chosen form for this breath. And I want to emphasize now that breath and nafs are very close. Our nafs, which are usually our unruly, egotistical things that we want to get purified from, is actually and one of the geniuses that's very well developed in Sufism is you don't the self, meaning the ego, is not to be transcended as it is to be allowed to be what it really wants to be, which is the servant. The nafs wants to serve, but uh, without understanding that it wants to be a servant, that it wants, and of course, what it's going to serve the real, and the real is going to allow it then to rest easy, and that resting in this natural restlessness of our egotism, uh, we uh, we find that motion, and once we're in step with that motion, that's when this walk becomes a way of like a metronome. It's setting up a timing for us so we can recognize. Of course, with a metronome, we think, oh, I heard it then, and I can expect it now because it follows a certain kind of rhythm. But of course, the WAP doesn't follow our anticipatory rhythms. In fact, our anticipations of it disguise it so that we can only notice it after it's gone. And like, oh, that was nice, but it's no longer here, you know. That's getting to the thing here that I wanted, the subtle sort of the yoga of the WAP, uh, which is the departure happens at the first moment of conceptualization, taskwar. You begin to form an image of, as soon as you begin to form an image of the present, you are no longer present. So you have presence, pure and simple, the pure thing. And then you have in presence, you have a subtle recoil, that little beat. And that forms me who's noticing the little beat. And the concept then of noticing the little beat becomes the concept that I've noticed. Therefore, I'm now this myself, my limited self, myself that is a beat behind or a beat before the actual uh, moment is this image that's always just a little off. And the so the real discloses itself as this moment, and the servant departs when they imagine there's a me who stands apart from the disclosure. And part of that standing apart is this this contraction that we do that precedes our thought. In this case, in almost the classic way, uh, you know, thinking is stinking, you know, and uh, and the and it's not anticipation, but it's the relaxation. So the departure occurs at the instant that the mind generates a watcher, obviously something that's being watched, and the relation between them. That the watcher needs to watch, and the watched wants to be seen by the watcher, and that's the architecture of absence. I am here, and the present is there, and consciousness has already stepped out of the real's appointment.
I love that. I love that.
Uh,
Yeah.
the imageal mechanics of the Barzakh flips that polarity. Uh, the isthmus between you and the real is transparent. Uh,
I
so
mean, now you're talking about that space, um, that liminal space or that veil or that barzakh, that in between means
yeah,
constant that in between space, right? Which you mentioned as far as between there's no God
yeah,
but God, or between the
yeah.
inhale and the exhale, that
Or
liminal,
there is only God.
right?
There is
Right.
when I was on my retreat uh, in Bashara in Scotland. I went through a period where I was just simply saying there's only God. There's only God. And I was doing it from the sense that me, the one who's saying there is only God, was realizing that the real, which is, we could get concrete about it, that we could say that everything that we see is the real, is everything we see is God. There is nothing but God. There is only God,
Hmm.
you know. But at the same instant, the only reason there's only God is because there is no knownness. Yeah, you can't the nothingness cannot assert its nothingness when it knows it's nothing. And that's where the nafs are they don't disappear, but they're calm. They're saying, okay, I know who I am. I know what I need to do. I need to find the rhythm to do this. I am here and the present is there. Consciousness has already stepped out of the real's appointment. And the uh, and the Barzakh becomes opaque and departure has occurred uh, where the Barzakh ceases to be the passage and becomes a picture. In other words, this is where this is really stepping as it stops being a mirror, becomes a
Yeah.
screen, it stops transmitting and it begins representing.
Mm.
Uh,
Well,
and
I
and
think for
that
this, even though it's interesting because, Antoine and I spoke a little bit about this idea of imaginal space and the imaginal realm. And um, but the interesting thing is that in this book, he doesn't necessarily is speaking about Barzakh in those terms, right? Which is, I mean, he is speaking about it in terms that it's always an in between, right?
uh-huh.
But as far as relating that to the moment and to the present, to the waqt, but I see now that you're sharing it that the the barzakh being kind of like that mirror or that function of projection from the real to the moment, right? It's just going woo. Um, and the barzakh being that function is being the tool, the mechanism of which the real is descent or manifesting in that moment for our perception.
Well, the grace is is being allowed to witness. And the witnessing here is we're not holding on. In fact, the witnessing effectively is a letting go. Uh, I wanted to share some sort of yogic views of the moment.
Well, before we
And
go into that, I want to see if Antoine um
yeah,
and
okay.
Jihan and RM want to
Mm.
jump in. I know RM been jumping in the chat as well. Um, she's loving the what the book is saying and the insights that's coming out um in the book and outside. And she was like, "Oh, we should do that in part two." Wow,
Mm.
that gave me goosebumps. I love that. Um, and Antoine has some stuff that he would like to jump in also, I think.
Yeah, but before I thank you, bro. Before I do, I wanted to also leave the spot open for Jihan, just because I know it's only really we only have another 10 minutes. I don't want to. Jihan, you want the space, or can I go ahead and share my little point?
Maybe just listening in a place that can't talk.
Okay, no problem. There was just a quick little. Okay, perfect. She said, please continue. Um, okay, where was it? I had a spot. I don't know exactly where. Oh, is this section where he wrote? It's both on page 16, but I don't know if we have the same page 16, bro. Um, he says my 2 points. It was on page 16, and I'll go. Should I go ahead and just read it out loud?
Yeah.
His appearance in his light is so intense that it overpowers our perceptions, so that we call his manifestation a veil. Oh, I mentioned that already. But I found that very interesting because the whole statement that you all talk about and you talk about often, Osama, and that Paul was just talking about as far as no God but God, and all there is God. Is all so in this statement. I feel like Ibn is saying this. Ibn Arabi is saying that's always the case. It's just that our perception hides it. Our contraction of perception is hiding the fact that there is none other than this devotion, this quality of God. But because our perception, our viewpoint contracts on itself, I guess because of this relationship with the ego or nafs not knowing itself to the full maturity, that is the case. It appears as a veil.
Hmm.
And then the other part is um, you as you sit on the carpet of his vision. Do you know where that was? Or 16? Then the nature of the return from him to the presence is that, do you know what that is?
Mhm.
I think this might be written a little bit different, but of his actions with him and to him, and I shall describe absorption in him, which is a station less than the state of return. I wanted to guess mention that very quickly that this idea of absorption in this transcendent or in this experience or presence with the Most High, he says is less than the return. And I figured that is because he's pointing to this idea that once we so-called leave the dissolution or the absorption, there is a possibility to never be in the sort of dark or behind the veil again. You can
Mm.
return in and of life and still have this ideal of or experience of complete absorption with the Most High.
Right. And that
The-
the idea of absorption and return. So this is absorption here is Fana and
Mhm.
return is Baqa, right?
Mm.
These are the concepts that we often speak about, right? And when he's saying that the return, which is the Baqa, which is to subside, subsistence in God, right? Like now that you have experienced, kind of like what you put it, now that you have experienced this transcendence, now you experienced this absorption, this um uh, kind of another way that Paul mentioned it also, maybe where the ego has realized its proper position, right? The return is a greater, it's a quote unquote, it's an extra step of living in this world with that. You're in it. Yeah. Is that how you're thinking of it, Antoine? Yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Hmm.
They say this phrase in the Vedas, establishing being, perform action. And
Right.
is I think this establishment is what I hear you guys mean here in this cosmology as a station. It's not a state just experienced immediately and out of it is a station, meaning you are there and you will never leave it again.
Right. Right.
Even even
I always thought that the interesting station, states are like like a film. They have lots of little pictures that moving fast, they look like they're moving, but they're all instantly still, and those are states. But a station is, you're running a movie, but the movie's moving around in this particular place that has qualities to it. Uh, there's some gestures that are very simple, little micro gestures of the instant, a WAP. One of them that one might get is a tightening in the chest, just a slight tightening. Suddenly you notice you have a heart, or your breath is not constricted in an interesting way. Like the surprise where your breath was just also a subtle leaning forward or backward, a very, very small movement. There's, you're moving out of it. You have a flicker of evaluation, like, aha, aha, aha. That's the flicker of evaluation. A faint narrative impulse. Well, I'm obviously suffering from a long narrative impulse, but essentially you want to explain the moment to the moment, and of course you've lost the moment in that process. A sense that you're really losing it when you say, "Well, yeah, this was fun, but I should be doing something else." And then, of course, uh, you're out of it when you want to a change, you want to improve, you want to escape, you want to interpret what's going on, all of
Mm-hmm.
which are subtle ways that we have. But so uh, the so consciousness departs from what is present at the first self-reflexive fold. The moment awareness turns towards itself and becomes an object of itself. And that fold is the birth of time and of self and of absence. Um, it is the moment when we stop being Ibn al-Waqt, the child of the moment, and become a Sahib al-Waqt, the one who tries to own and manage the moment. And we know who's trying to do that. Um, I wrote a poem, which I'm only going to read a little pieces of. WAP is a seed of specification, a mark of cut that drifts the hours. But the word also begins to glow when the real asks, who specifies, who's specified? What is the nature of a boundary that has no second side? WAP is not time, it's the inclination where the real removes all alternatives. The child of the moment has no yesterday and no tomorrow, only the blade of disclosure pressed against the breath, and here the limit becomes the opening. Here, as the appointed station is the only possible form. Here, the real's decision is the shape of my response. WAP binds so that it may free. It forbids me by importing a future that not yet breathed, or dragging behind me the corpse of a vanished hour. It frees me from the burden of choosing between what never was and what cannot yet be. Thus, the Gnostic stands perfectly responsive, not passive, but unresisting before the real's specification. And the Wat is the Barzakh. It separates the past from the future, joins the past to the future, is neither, is both in potential, a hinge of transformation, a threshold where the decree becomes visible as it arrives. And the Adab al-Wap is severe. Do not flee the moment. Do not anticipate another moment. Do not regret the previous moment. Do not imagine a better one. Do not claim authorship for what has been appointed. Meet the moment with the form that it demands, and the Gnostic is the form of their moment, shaped, not shaping. And I could go on,
Amazing.
leave it there. Oh, well, wait. Might as well see if I can get to here. And consciousness departs at the first self-reflexive fold when awareness turns towards itself and becomes an object to itself. This is the birth of time, of self, of absence, the moment we cease to be the child of the moment and become the one who tries to own the moment. So I guess that's all I've got to say today.
That's beautiful.
Fire!
That's beautiful. That's amazing. That's amazing. Always on point. Thank you so much. And right on time, as always. Right on the moment, right on the waqt. Wow. That's so gorgeous, Paul. Thank you so much. And I do realize that it is 9:30 and it's at that time. This has been definitely fruitful to read this book and to even read it with you guys and hear everyone's perspective on this. And as Ibn Arabi closed his treatise and his letter by saying, and still the knower is thirsty continually forever, and desire and all cleave to him continually forever. And for the like of this, let the workers work, and for the like of this, let the contenders contend. I mean,
I mean, absolutely beautiful, bro. Thank you for choosing this book. Oh, and Paul, thank you for everything you just contributed, bro. And RM and Jihan, feeling blessed to be in this group today.
likewise, likewise. And for whoever is celebrating or observing, I guess, Ramadan Kareem. And hopefully we'll see you next month, March Book Club. And yeah, for everybody who also oh, RM asked, did I break my fast? Yes, I did. Definitely. It's 9:30 right now over here in New Jersey, so I definitely broke my fast. Um, for everybody watching on the replay or even here, we're working on a school community to bring in this book club in that we can kind of have an online home, if you will, where we can share these books and share some practices and be able to do the practices and share poetry maybe and a bunch of other stuff also. So stay on the lookout for the link for that to invite you to join that community, God willing, soon.
Yes.
And until then, so much love and gratitude and blessings and all good things and light and truth and love. I mean,
I mean, Paul, send us that poem.
yes,
Love y'all.
love you.
See ya.
Take
Have a
care.
beautiful night.